Versatile Mage. Chapter 276. Epic Battle Against the Cavern Slaves. There were 3 people in the team with fire element: Mo Fan, Song Chia, and Zhao Mingyu. The 3 immediately cast fire burst at the vines on both sides of the tunnel. Since they were using burning bones, the vines were burned away quickly. When the vines finished burning into scorched ashes, the group immediately realized that there were 2 other caves close to them. The cavern slaves coming from the front and the rear were scary, but they could still hold them off with their magic. A potential ambush right beside them was the scariest, since it would catch the group off guard, and the magic they cast would also cause friendly fire if they panicked. Those in the middle of the group should try and eliminate the cavern slaves in the caves nearby as soon as possible. Lu Zhenghe shouted furiously above the noise in the tunnel. Mo Fan was quite surprised. Lu Zhenghe might be arrogant, but he knew what he was doing as a commander. He was most likely the person that told them to burn the vines down. Their priority now was to eliminate the cavern slaves in the nearby caves, as they could not be allowed to come close to the team. The biggest difference between the magicians and the demon beasts was not power, but the fact that magicians were far weaker when it came to close quarters combat. A single swing of the bone stick would hit like a hydraulic hammer. Despite being elites in their respective schools, it was difficult for them to control the situation straight away when their lives were endangered all of a sudden. The student from the Imperial College called Xiao Feng found himself in an extremely dangerous position, as he was flanked by 2 cavern slaves at the same time. Bright Mirror Shield. Xiao Feng activated his shield in the nick of time. However, the cavern slaves were not as slow-witted as he had imagined. The bone stick that was aimed at his chest was repelled, but the other was aimed straight at his calf, where there was no protection. The bone stick made direct contact with his right calf, as Xiao Feng could not dodge in time. The horrifying sound of cracked bone rang out instantly. "Ah, help! Ah!" Xiao Feng screamed in agony, and before he could withdraw, his left calf received the second blow. His 2 legs, solid and muscular a few seconds ago, were smashed flat, leaving pulped flesh and bone behind. Blood splattered everywhere, as everything below Xiao Feng's knees was shattered. He subconsciously crawled toward his teammates on the ground in extreme pain. It was shocking enough that he could still stay conscious, due to magicians having stronger minds than ordinary people. His calves had been directly shattered. Ice spread. As the group finally realized that Xiao Feng was separated from them, Muningzhu was the first to react by casting her ice element spell. The layer of frost spread rapidly across the ground, turning the area where the 2 cavern slaves were into an icy white zone. The icy mist immediately covered their eyes. The ice spread won't be enough to save him. Peng Liang immediately acted as he was aware that the spell ice spread needed some time to freeze the target. By then, Xiao Feng would already be crushed to pieces. However, as soon as Peng Liang arrived in front of Xiao Feng, the movements of the 2 ferocious cavern slaves suddenly came to a stop. In just less than a second, the not-so-muscular legs of the cavern slaves were covered in a layer of ice. The ice spread froze their flesh first, before completely freezing the blood in their legs. It totally stopped the 2 cavern slaves from moving, and they cried out in anger. They were totally unaware of the ice spread climbing up the bodies, swiftly freezing them solid. A moment later, the only body parts that they could move were their muscular arms. They were turned into ice statues. Peng Liang opened his mouth wide, finding it hard to believe. Normally, the freezing effect of ice spread would need at least 4 seconds to work. However, Muningzhu's ice spread had done it in less than 2 seconds. It was way too fast, even faster than those with a spirit-grade ice seed. "Ah, ugh!" Xiao Feng continued to scream in pain, before he was rescued from the jaws of death by Peng Liang with his fleeing shadow. "I'll take care of him." Bai Tingting was standing right in the center of the team. She was no doubt the one protected the most by the team. When Peng Liang placed Xiao Feng on the ground, Bai Tingting had already completed the casting of her healing spell. A light green drop of liquid slid off Bai Tingting's fingertip and was sprinkled on Xiao Feng's legs. The glowing liquid slowly penetrated into Xiao Feng's injured body parts. When the liquid finally covered his mangled legs, Xiao Feng finally stopped screaming in pain. "I'm providing you some relief from the pain. It will take me some time to heal you," Bai Tingting said to the pale-faced Xiao Feng. Xiao Feng wiped the combination of tears and mucus from his face. He had almost lost his life just a few moments ago, so he could not care less about his image. "Help the others first. I'm fine." The healing liquid was like a strong anesthesia. "Xiao Feng, are you all right?" Ming Kong asked in a worried tone, while casting a lightning strike. "I was almost dead. Luckily Ningzhu reacted quickly enough." Xiao Feng wiped the sweat on his forehead. He knew that now was not the best time to chat. They had to clear out the beasts on both sides as soon as possible. Otherwise, they would be in grave trouble. At the very front, Zheng Bingshao's rock golem stood no chance against the cavern slave's attacks. Only half of its body remained after receiving countless blows from the beasts. "Zheng Bingshao, withdraw your summoned beast," Zhao Manting said. Zheng Bingshao swiftly withdrew the half-crippled rock golem. At the same time, he could sense a strong watery mist in his surroundings. He looked back and saw Zhao Manting casting an intermediate water spell, summoning rolling waves like a dam had just burst, which surged forward with a great roar. The furious tide reached almost half the height of the tunnel. It dragged the cavern slaves that were closest to the group with it and continued to roll forward ferociously. The efficiency of an intermediate spell was instantly displayed. The number of cavern slaves coming from the front was the highest, and the rolling tide was enough to hinder their advance. "My turn," Song Chia shouted as she began to cast an intermediate fire spell on her wrist. Several cavern slaves were still trying to recover from the impact of the fierce tide when they were terrified by the approaching fiery fists. A bright glow lit the entire tunnel up. The beasts that could not dodge in time let out cries of agony as they were burnt into ashes by the giant fists, leaving only the stench of burned flesh behind. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 277. Charge. The cavern slaves let out a weird shriek. They were afraid of the intermediate spells, yet they were still lunging forward without hesitation. It appeared that they were using their own flesh to clear the path for their comrades. The intermediate spells were powerful, but they were not enough to hold off the cavern slaves' kamikaze push. The cavern slaves rapidly drew nearer to the group of students. "Attack! Kill them all, we can't let them get any closer. Otherwise, we will be buried here," Lu Zhengge yelled. Everyone no longer dared to conserve their magic, casting their spells continuously, with no disconnection between the projectiles. Fire burst, earth wave, lightning strike, brilliant light, the glows emitted from each element lit up the pitch-black tunnel like a violent rainbow, together with explosions, mudslides, frost, blinding flashes, vine whips. Casting an intermediate spell required the alignment of 49 stars, thus slowing the rate of attacks, and if they lost awareness of their surroundings for just a second, there was a high chance that they would be smashed into pieces by the sticks of their attackers. The cavern slaves would not give them enough time to finish their channeling. They would need some protection in order to cast intermediate spells, as spending 3 to 6 seconds just to align the stars was more than enough for them to die a few times over to the heavy blows of the bone sticks. Luckily, the group consisted of quite a number of students. 17 intermediate magicians took turns to attack with their magic, while mixing 1 or 2 intermediate spells in between. They managed to get the situation under control by preventing the cavern slaves from approaching closer than 20 meters to them. The cavern slaves were pretty much practice targets. It was impossible for them to get any closer as long as the group had enough firepower. The only threat was still the caves on the sides, since no one could tell how many of these ugly beasts were still waiting in them. "Watch out," Bai Tingting blurted out when she suddenly noticed something out of place beside Liao Mingxuan. Liao Mingxuan reacted swiftly, using the wind track, flash steps to relocate himself. A huge cavern slave crossed paths with Liao Mingxuan. Its bone stick almost struck his skull with a mighty swing. Damn it, why are the monsters in these caves never ending? Liao Mingxuan moved to a safer spot and watched the caves with lingering fear. There were 3 caves on the sides. 2 of them no longer had any beasts jumping out from them, indicating that the beasts inside were completely eliminated, but more than 10 had already come out from the remaining big cave. Some among the group were forced to use their defensive gear. Meanwhile, Bai Tingting had never stopped using her healing magic. Mo Fan, charge into the cave with me, Mu Ningzhu said, glancing at Mo Fan while pointing at the cave. Do we really have to be so aggressive? Mo Fan was not so willing. Heaven knows how many beasts there are inside the cave. What if we can't get out after charging into it? Mu Ningzhu did not want to waste her time debating with Mo Fan. She drifted on an icy wind path and disappeared into the cave in full darkness. Mo Fan had no choice but to put his life at stake to keep the beautiful woman company. He followed Mu Ningzhu into the cave. It turned out that the cave was extremely spacious, at least double the size of the tunnel. Mo Fan had no idea that these ugly cavern slaves enjoyed such great accommodations. Unlucky for them, it was time to burn them all down. As Mo Fan raised his hands, flames ignited on both his palms, burning bones on the left and rupture on the right. Mo Fan did not even care if there were beasts nearby, since they could still be used as sources of light. The blaze lit up the entire cave. Mo Fan surprisingly discovered that the cave was actually connected to the other caves. Motherfucker, no wonder the beasts kept coming. The caves are interconnected. The cavern slaves from the other caves can come through them. Mo Fan cursed. Mu Ningzhu led the way, leaving a proud, icy back to Mo Fan as usual. Her wind track's speed was double the speed of an ordinary wind path. She boldly proceeded forward with utter confidence, and it seemed she was planning to flank the enemies using the cave in return. The Nirvana ice domain spread through her surroundings automatically as she moved. Through its unique aura, she could easily detect any movement in her surroundings without relying on her vision. As they passed through the cave, 4 pairs of eyes suddenly sprang open in the midst of darkness, followed by a shuffling noise. The cavern slaves surely had some way to see in the dark. They were waiting for Mu Ningzhu to approach them in the corner, but little did they know, the claws of the ice had already reached out to them while they were holding their breath and lying on the ground. Ma! The 4 cavern slaves let out a terrifying scream as they lunged toward Mu Ningzhu from 4 different directions. Mu Ningzhu remained stationary in the middle. Her icy eyes flickered menacingly. Ice lock. She had already completed the star pattern. It was hilarious that the 4 cavern slaves thought they had hidden their presence well. The thick ice chains appeared from nowhere, launching themselves toward the 4 cavern slaves at Mu Ningxui's command. The ice chains caught the cavern slaves off guard, wrapping around the beasts in the air. Bone husk. Mu Ningzhu proceeded with the follow-up move, and the ice chains clenched tightly with outstanding might. The horrifying sound of bones crackling echoed in the cave. The 4 cavern slaves did not stand a single chance. The bone sticks in their hands fell to the ground as they exhaled their last breaths. Mo Fan had no way to increase his movement speed. As soon as he caught up to Mu Ningzhu, he was right in time to witness the 4 cavern slaves being shattered into pieces by the ice lock, bone husk. Mu Ningzhu was standing right in the middle of the 4 corpses and glanced at the irritatingly slow Mo Fan in silence, before continuing forward with her wind track. Mo Fan was left speechless. He was about to go after her when he felt the slight shudder from his little loach pendant. Right. These soul remnants can be turned into soul essences. Mo Fan recalled in the thick of things and quickly collected the soul remnants of the cavern slaves. The soul remnants would only linger for a short period of time after the death, thus he had to be quick in retrieving them, otherwise, they would just disappear. Mo Fan quickly went after Mu Ningzhu after he was done with his task, but it turned out that Mu Ningzhu totally had no mercy, unlike a normal woman. Mo Fan could see several corpses turned into ice statues along the way. Mo Fan decisively collected the soul remnants. He barely caught a glimpse of Mu Ningzu before she disappeared within the blink of an eye again. Mo Fan could not help but murmur, "Damn it, why do I feel like I'm a newbie being carried by a big sister in an instance? Should I just follow behind her and pick up the loot?" Chapter N. Versatile Mage. Chapter 278. Flanking from behind. The bone sticks smacked right into the ground and the wall Mu Ningzu was previously at. This time, Mu Ningzu was having a hard time killing the cavern slaves instantly. First, there were 7 of them in total, and second, her ice lock was on cooldown. Using intermediate wind magic in a cave like this was not effective at all, as the path between the caves was too narrow. Mu Ningzu could only use the wind track to speed herself up while waiting for her frost to spread forward. However, the cavern slaves were not total idiots. They immediately smacked the ground with their bone sticks when they saw a layer of ice approaching their feet. The ice was instantly shattered, not allowed to spread any further ahead. Their actions placed Mu Ningzu in quite a passive situation, and she had no choice but to back off. "I should be waiting for that guy," Mu Ningzu said with a hint of remorse. Mu Ningzu also realized that she had gone too far. She had no idea how long it would take Mo Fan to reach her since he did not have any movement magic. He could easily deal with the cavern slaves. The combination of fire and lightning was like adding violence to violence, unlike her, who did not have any destructive moves when the ice lock was on cooldown. "Guess I'll have to use my equipment," Mu Ningzu mumbled under her breath. Mu Ningzu had been using the wind track to kite the 7 cavern slaves for quite a while. However, with the bone sticks being swung around wildly, it was only a matter of time before she was hit. Changjin lightning strike, wrath shock. In the midst of the darkness, a figure appeared from the shadows. He was already casting a few lightning strikes as he moved. As Mo Fan sent out the order, the lightning strikes targeted the beast which was chasing after Mu Ningzu. The lightning strikes struck consecutively. The numbness from the electrification and the stun from Changjin's special effect stacked together, and the beast dropped lifelessly to the ground after being turned into a scorched meat lump. Mu Ningxui's eyes flickered with a hint of joy when she saw Mo Fan. She quickly used her wind track to move to Mo Fan's side. Her heavy panting showed that she had experienced some danger during the battle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just about right, Mo Fan said with a grin. When he was casting the lightning strike with his left hand, his right wrist had already turned fiery. He did not launch the attack as he was worried that he would hurt Mu Ningzu too, but it was no longer his concern. Rose Flame Fiery Fist. Exploding Heaven. Using the fiery fist in such a limited space did not require any accuracy, as the spreading flame was enough to fill the entire area. As Mo Fan threw his punch forward, the raging flames lunged at the 6 cavern slaves. No matter how hard they screamed and tried to flee, they had no chance to escape from the flames. Mo Fan's Rose Flame Fiery Fist was way more ruthless than Song Chia's. Zhao Manting and Song Chia had first used water raging waves, before following it up with the fiery fist to eliminate 7 to 8 cavern slaves. In comparison, Mo Fan's magic did not even need an intermediate spell to set the scene up. The double power Rose Flame instantly burned the beasts into ashes. They did not have any time to feel pain. Mu Ningxui's heart rippled as she glanced at the confident look on Mo Fan's face while feeling the heat from his aura. In her memory, this fellow used to be making meaningless jokes all the time, but he had changed significantly now. She knew clearly, even when she was still a teenager, that only with enough power would they have the freedom to choose for themselves. She initially thought their paths would be separate, but they somehow stumbled into each other at the peak of their age group. "Wasn't I cool?" Mo Fan turned his head and winked at Mu Ningzu. "You've arrived earlier than I thought." Mu Ningzu totally ignored his question. He. Mo Fan let out a charming smile as he mumbled in his heart, "I was using my fleeing shadow to get here, why wouldn't I be faster?" Using League of Legends terms, I have used my ghost and flash to save my teammate. The remaining flames of the fiery fist landed at different spots in the cave. The light was just enough to reveal the situation ahead. Muning Zhu glanced ahead and pointed at the wall. There's a turn there. It might be connected to the other nests, Mo Fan said. You take the lead. In the main tunnel, the other 15 students were still busy holding the attackers from both directions off. The corpses had begun to pile up, but they still had no idea how many of these ugly beasts were left. Luckily, since the threat from the sides was dealt with, they had organized 7 magicians in each direction to take turns casting their spells. The cavern slaves' advancement was totally suppressed. Damn it, there are still a lot coming from behind them. Don't worry, they won't dare to simply rush and die in vain. Strange, why are they screaming in the back? Who cares, I'll let them have a piece of my fiery fists. Song Chia threw a punch forward, to great effect. The flames killed 4 cavern slaves instantly. However, the group was confused when the cavern slaves who were gathering their comrades before the next attack seemed to be panicking all of a sudden. Rose Flame Fiery Fist, Groundbreak, Nirvana Ice Lock, Bone Husk. The magic chants of a man and a woman were heard coming from the darkness ahead. Before anyone could react, a brilliant flower of death blossomed in front of the cavern slaves. Under the blinding blaze, an unknown number of cavern slaves were completely burned into ashes. The Groundbreak was destructive enough on its own, but the thick chains of the deadly ice lock surrounded the cavern slaves and contracted rapidly. The cavern slaves who initially had a chance to escape from the Groundbreak were all pushed right into the flames. The cavern slaves did not expect 2 intermediate spells enchanted by the soul seeds to attack them from behind. More than 20 of them died to the combination of ice and fire. It's Mo Fan and Muning Zhu. Damn it, how did they end up behind the cavern slaves? I can't even describe how impressed I am. The group of students was wide-eyed, with fascinating expressions on their faces. A few seconds ago, they were forced to take a defensive stance against the cavern slaves coming from both directions, but these 2 managed to make their way behind their enemies and flanked them in return. Out of nowhere, the cavern slaves were suddenly being attacked from both directions. The morale of the students standing the ground against the cavern slaves in the front skyrocketed as they synchronized their attacks with the violent duo to bombard the cavern slaves with their magic. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 279. Escaping the Cave. As the cavern slaves began to panic, the magicians were able to cast their spells at will. The servant-class beasts had no chance of defending themselves from the overwhelming power of intermediate magic. Not long afterwards, the cavern slaves in front of the group totally lost hope and began to flee into the caves nearby. While a few escaped, those that stayed ended up as piles of corpses lying on the ground with crushed flesh and severed limbs. None of them were in one piece. When only a few of the beasts were left, Muning Zhu cast her ice magic to seal off the caves to the sides. The layer of ice solidified swiftly, forming a frozen wall which completely blocked the entrance to the caves, preventing the cavern slaves from ambushing them again. Let's go, there's no point staying here any longer, Muning Zhu said to the crowd. The railway tunnel was not very wide. They did not have much space to move around, so wind and lightning intermediate spells were not suitable to cast here. They also had no idea if there were any more cavern slaves hiding somewhere in the tunnel. They had to leave as soon as possible. Let's go, Lu Zhengge yelled. The group proceeded forward. The cavern slaves behind them were still uttering angry cries. Zhu Delong, Zhao Mingyu, Qingqing and the rest managed to hold them off. Everyone let out a relieved sigh when they found the path ahead was clear. Forest of Kun. Qingqing finally had the chance to use her plant element intermediate spell, under the protection of her teammates. The Forest of Kun summoned plenty of thorns, vines, and branches behind them, blocking the path of the cavern slaves. It would take some time for them to destroy the Forest of Kun. Zhu Delong, Zhao Mingyu, Shen Mingshao, Qingqing, and the others who were in charge of protecting the rear immediately regrouped with the others. Those with earth element, use the earth wave. Lu Zhenghe shouted. Zhu Delong and Luo Song quickly cast the earth wave, the soil below moving forward in ripples, increasing the speed of the group as they forged ahead. The remaining length of the tunnel was filthy and filled with a foul scent. Rotted corpses and feces could be seen everywhere. However, none of the students were too bothered by that, as they were still being chased by a huge number of beasts behind them. They continued to follow the railway. I can see light ahead. We made it, we're almost outside, blurted out Lu Zhenghe, who was leading the way. Lu Zhenghe had already summoned his violent Mark Wolf to clear the path. It smashed the cavern slaves it stumbled onto to death straight away. The others also quickened their paces when they saw the light. Most of them found it difficult to open their eyes for a while after spending a prolonged period in darkness. However, the moment they entered the sunlight, it felt extremely pleasant, just like entering a bath. Do a head count, quick. Lu Zhenghe seemed to have some sort of experience as a team leader. He did not let his guard down even after exiting the tunnel. Good on our side. Liao Mingxuan quickly counted the 8 people from their school. Song Chia immediately counted her group, but her face turned pale when she counted 8 in total. She blurted out in panic, "We are missing one." The Pearl Institute had 9 in total, including Bai Tingting with her rare healing element. However, Song Chia still failed to count 9 people after doing a recount. Who's missing? Mu Nujiao asked worriedly. Peng Liang is here, Luo Song is here, Zhao Manting. Oh my god, Mo Fan isn't here. Song Chia felt her heart clenching. Damn it, I'm going to save him. Zhao Manting let out a curse and turned around, heading straight for the tunnel. Mu Nujiao did not hesitate to follow Zhao Manting too, but a figure with an icy aura acted faster than her, no other than Ningzhu. Don't be ridiculous, if he weren't here with us, he is probably a pile of minced meat now, Shen Mingxiao said. There was no way Shen Mingxiao would go back into the filthy, smelly tunnel after trying so hard to escape it. Besides, he had spent half of his energy during the battle, so he would most likely be killed if he were trapped inside once again. Who were you describing? Asked a figure who appeared from the shadows. Holy crap, you scared me to death. Zhao Manting cursed again when he saw Mo Fan coming out from the tunnel. The others halted in their tracks too, before letting out relieved sighs. If someone were to die before they even reached the desolated city, how difficult would their actual mission be? What were you up to? I thought you were walking ahead of us just then, Mu Nujiao asked Mo Fan curiously. Nothing. Mu Nujiao's eyes flickered suspiciously, but since Mo Fan was not willing to tell her, she decided not to ask further. Since everyone's fine, we should leave this place and find somewhere to set up a camp, Song Chia said. I agree, I'm dying from the smell. I'm feeling a slight headache, probably because I've spent too much energy. How's Xiao Feng doing? The bone is being reconstructed. He'll need some time, Bai Tingting said. The group was quite confident with their capabilities when they first entered the tunnel, but all of them were extremely tired and depressed now, with wounds all over. The one that suffered the most severe injury was Xiao Feng. Peng Liang was protecting him throughout the entire battle. Luckily, they had a healer in their team. Otherwise, they would have lost one of their crew even before arriving at the desolate city. The group found a place with a supply of water close to the railway. After checking the perimeter to make sure there weren't any beasts around, they began to put up tents and rest up. As the night fell, the boys sat around the campfire. The light from it shone upon the young faces. The night was extremely quiet. The only sound was the crackling noise from the burning wood. Suddenly, Zhao Manting broke the silence as he whispered, "Are you sure they're bathing in the river?" "That's right, Mu Nujiao is there too." A strong burst of hormones resulted in a weird atmosphere between them. Some swallowed hard, some licked the dry lips, while others could not help but glance in the direction of the river. Peng Liang, why don't you go and take a look? With your shadow element, they won't notice you at all. I don't think that's a good idea. Peng Liang said with a red face. Despite saying that, Peng Liang's body betrayed him, turning into a puff of shadow and disappearing into the woods. Everyone was envious seeing Peng Liang making his move. Why didn't we awaken a shadow element too? Ha! Why are the trees freezing? I'm afraid Peng Liang was exposed. Ha ha, that idiot. Our captain's ice domain isn't just for decoration. It could pick up the ripple of magic energy from a certain distance. Peng Liang is done for. Zhu Delong instantly burst out laughing. Chapter End. Versatile Mage. Chapter 280. It's D for sure. The night sky was extraordinarily clear in the wild. The moonlight shone upon the woods as the willows danced in the breeze, causing the shadows to sway slightly. The water of the river flickered like diamonds as its surface reflected the bright radiance of the moon. Clothing releasing a faint fragrance had been placed beside the river, consisting of various colors and elegant styles. Some were made of muslin or lace, and were either close-fitting or loose. In the river under the moonlight, maidens who looked like night elves were splashing the water onto the bare and flawless skin, resulting in quite a spectacular view. The occasional giggle embellished the silent woods. The clear water of the river flowed steadily by. It felt great despite being quite cold. Are you tired of your life? Suddenly, an icy voice echoed in the woods before a shadow moved aside rapidly. Zhao Mingyu, Bai Tingting, Mu Nujiao, Qingqing, and the rest of the women immediately dropped into the water while scanning the surroundings with sharp looks. What's going on? Song Chia, who was helping the girls keep an eye out, hurried her way over with a confused expression. Someone's there. It's the energy of the shadow element. Who has the shadow element? Peng Liang. It must be him. The guys were still chatting around the campfire, telling each other what they had encountered in the past. In simpler words, they were boasting. A moment later, the girls appeared with long faces, as if their eyes could penetrate one's heart. Who was that just then? Song Chia cut straight to the point. She pointed at the men and snapped furiously. Who could it be? There's only one person with the shadow element in our group. Qingqing glared at Peng Liang. Peng Liang's face turned pale. He immediately rose to his feet and explained, I didn't. I was only in the woods. I didn't even have the chance to get close to the river. I didn't see anything. Oh Peng Liang, I never thought you were that kind of person. I'm embarrassed to call you a teammate. Zhao Manting coughed and said with a stern look. Zhao Manting, you. Peng Liang suddenly felt betrayed. Just a moment ago, every guy was jealous that he had the chance to enjoy a spectacular view. Who knew that they would all turn their backs and act like they were gentlemen when the girls found out? Peng Liang had no choice but to admit it. He admitted that he did have the intention, but he swore that he did not manage to take a peek, as he did not even get to see the river. Forget it. Song Chia was looking out for us too. He was probably just running around in the woods. Humph. What a scum. Pervert. Hypocrite. The ladies furiously returned to their tents. The men surrounding the campfire nodded quickly, totally hanging Peng Liang out to dry right until the end. Peng Liang suddenly felt his life was over. He felt like crying, but there were no tears. The dispute was soon settled. The young men took turns as watchmen for the group as everyone began to go to bed. Mo Fan, where were you just then? Mo Fan and Zhao Manting were the first up on duty. Zhao Manting suddenly recalled that Mo Fan did leave for a moment during the previous dispute. I am used to being on alert all the time, so I was just patrolling nearby, Mo Fan said with a stern look. Oh. Is that so? If I'm not mistaken, I remember that you do have a shadow element equipment. Zhao Manting raised his brows and blurted out in an indifferent manner. Mo Fan coughed awkwardly, as he initially thought his plan was executed perfectly. Unfortunately, Zhao Manting had already read his mind. How was it? Who had the best physique? Zhao Manting's eyes flickered. Even though he did not have the chance to witness it with his own eyes, he could still imagine it in his mind through Mo Fan's description. I can now tell you that Mu Nujiao is indeed a D. Holy crap, are you for real? I mean, look at her, It's already unbelievable if she had a C. If you're telling me she's a D, tusk. There's something you won't even think of, Mo Fan said with a mysterious tone. What is it? Hurry up and say it. Zhao Manting was utterly excited. The biggest ones are by Tingtings. Oh my, that chick has been hiding them well. It does suit her element. How about Mu Ningzhu? She must be hot. I can tell she's a beauty among all just by looking at her skin and her collarbones. I didn't get to see it. Her perception was stronger than I thought. Luckily, I had Peng Liang as the scapegoat. Outside the tents, a figure moved rapidly in the woods in a seemingly anxious manner. When the person went into the woods, the sound of water dripping to the ground was heard. Zhao Manting, who was patrolling, went up and asked, and it turned out to be someone getting up from sleep to take a leak. The person did not return to his tent straight away after finishing his business. His hidden eyes glanced carefully in Zhao Manting's direction before hiding behind a tree. The figure slowly took out a glowing pen-shaped object and buried it in the ground. The figure then pretended to be half asleep while returning to the tent with a yawn. As the night grew late, the campfire had already died. 6 tents, each with the capacity for 3 people, stood quietly on the grass. The place fell into a dead silence as the chirps of the birds and bugs disappeared. Zhao Manting was in charge of patrolling, while Mo Fan kept an eye from high up. Mo Fan slouched above a tree branch among the woods. Since he could capture any strange movement with his shadow element, he did not need to rely on his eyes. I wonder if I can refine a soul essence from the soul remnants I've collected. Mo Fan murmured. He had come out from the tunnel last because he was looting the soul remnants from the dead cavern slaves. Over 100 glowing green dots were floating above the spiritual river inside the little loach pendant. They remained at their own spots without budging, so it was hard to tell if they were condensing. Is it because there aren't enough of them? More than 100 soul remnants were not enough to refine a soul essence. Oh, they're condensing. Mo Fan was overjoyed when he saw the soul remnants he had collected finally show some reaction. A white gaseous substance seemed to be clumping them together. They began to collide into each other within the white mist. Each collision would cause 2 glowing dots to merge into one, with a brighter glow. Over 100 glowing dots suddenly turned into just over 50, which began to collide with one another once again. The same process repeated continuously. Just as Mo Fan was trying to imagine what would happen if they were an odd number, a relatively bright soul remnant began to devour the soul remnants nearby. It ended up consuming all the remaining 7 or 8 soul remnants. Following that, the initial cloudy glow of the soul remnant began to peel open, revealing a bright firefly-like glow under the layer. It's a soul essence. I managed to refine a soul essence. Mo Fan screamed in silent joy in his heart. Mo Fan immediately directed the servant class soul essence to the 2nd star of his lightning nebula, instantly upgrading it. 5 more to go, and my lightning strike will rank up to the 4th tier. I wonder what it's going to look like. I suppose only a few magicians would actually try to upgrade it to the 4th tier. Tusk. How exciting. Chapter end. Please guys like, comment, share, and subscribe.